Here, a number of points being made about the need for the refurbishment of this piece of legislation, bearing in mind the changes in technology over the last 35 years or so. And it's interesting to note that almost every area of core business of policing, for instance, is now replicated in some form by the security industry, done privately. And so the need for that, as the public perceive it, is such that these people need to be certificated, they need to go through a vetting process, and the public needs to be able to be reassured that these people are worthy of their trust. A number of those points made by the previous speaker. Just how far, though, the need for that certification will extend really relates to its impact on the public and the public going about their private business. There has been some discussion, for instance, around Clause 66 and who is able to use video camera surveillance or still photographs. And, of course, what we know is that a private investigator is unable to do that currently, regardless of the fact that they have been through that police vetting process and also the fact that they are certificated personnel. And yet members of the public can do that any time they want. Now, the point is often made that a person who is a private investigator has the knowledge and the skills probably, but also the motivation to do things that are on the edge of what is acceptable and what isn't, because they are doing it for reward, whereas a member of the public is frequently only motivated by their own interest or some particular hobby horse they may be on at any one time. I need to point out, of course, though, that unscrupulous members of the security profession, journalists and others, are in a position currently to be able to manipulate members of the public so that they can do things that the certificated private investigator can't. And it seems to me to be ridiculous then that these people can be used in that unscrupulous way without any sort of regulation at all, and hence the government's preference then for regulations, a code of conduct to be regulated and put in place of what was the Clause 66 model. And I think that that is a valid response to it, bearing in mind where technology has gone. I guess I'd like to cover off another point that was introduced, a question introduced by the previous speaker in respect of, is there then a need for community patrol people who are frequently sitting in police stations monitoring CCTV cameras that are used to monitor the public as they go about their business, for instance, late night, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. And we have to remember that those community patrol people who are sitting in police stations and watching those CCTVs at the moment have been through a police vetting process in any event, otherwise they wouldn't be allowed to be sitting inside a police station and have sort of access or be in the vicinity of confidential information for a start. The second point to make is that whereas a number of those CCTVs are mounted on private property, they are almost invariably looking into what is public property, if not entirely publicly owned, public in the terms of Section 2 of the Police Offences Act, for instance, which covers land which is private but accessible by the public, whether it is right or not. So, for instance, it may be looking over car parks, the backs of hotels, alleyways, or into pieces of land that are frequently the subject of intrusion or trespass by drunken idiots that we want to monitor over these CCTVs. And the community patrol members who are monitoring those video cameras are not required to be certificated at the moment, nevertheless have been through a vetting process and are generally operating under the fairly close supervision of members of the police who are on duty at the time. So I think it's important to point out those few measures and to commend the bill to the House, bearing in mind it is not only dragging a piece of legislation kicking and screaming into the 21st century, long overdue, but it takes account of technologies that have come into vogue and are easily accessible to the public that weren't in the past, and it will provide a greater degree of scrutiny over those people who have got some power and authority over us for instance, private investigators, security personnel. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Call Carmel Sepuloni.
Mr. Chair.